It started like any other evening. I was in the kitchen, humming a familiar tune, stirring a pot of soup while my fiancé, Ethan, worked on something in the garage. The warm glow of our home always felt like a shield from the outside world, a place where everything was safe, predictable. Then came the knock at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate enough to make me pause. I glanced at the clock. 7:13 p.m. We weren't expecting anyone. Curiosity got the best of me. Wiping my hands on a kitchen towel, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. A man stood there, his figure barely illuminated by the porch light. There was something vaguely familiar about him. Dark hair neatly combed, a calm but unreadable expression. Caution whispered in my mind, but I unlatched the chain and cracked the door open. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled, a polite yet almost rehearsed smile. "Hey, Julia. It's been a long time." Hearing my name startled me. I studied his face more intently. Then, it clicked. "Adam?" My voice betrayed my surprise. He nodded. "I was passing through town and thought I'd drop by." "Is Ethan home?" Adam had once been a close friend of Ethan's. Years ago, when we first got engaged, he used to be around often. But one day, without warning, he vanished from our lives. No explanation, no goodbye. And now, here he was, standing on our doorstep as if nothing had changed. Something about his casual demeanor felt off, but I forced a smile. "He's in the garage. Come in. I'll get him." As Adam stepped inside, his gaze swept over our living room as if he was memorizing every detail. The air in the house grew heavier, though I couldn't say why. It was just Adam after all. Yet, as I turned to call Ethan, a strange unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I called toward the garage, my voice slightly shaky despite my effort to sound normal. "Ethan, you have a visitor!" A moment later, Ethan appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. The moment his eyes landed on Adam, his expression shifted. There was a flicker of recognition, followed by something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Adam." His voice was even, but his jaw tightened. "It's been a while." Adam smirked, tilting his head slightly. "It really has. Thought I'd drop by, see how life's been treating you." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yeah, come on in." I watched them carefully as they moved toward the living room. Something was off. Ethan's shoulders were tense, his usual relaxed demeanor absent. I followed them, sitting on the arm of the couch while Ethan and Adam took seats opposite each other. At first, their conversation was harmless, reminiscing about old friends, catching up on surface-level details. But the energy between them felt forced, like two actors playing a role they didn't quite remember. Then Adam leaned forward slightly, his expression darkening. "Do you ever think about that night?" His voice was soft but deliberate. Ethan's entire body stiffened. His eyes darted toward me, then back to Adam. "Not here," he said quickly. "Not now." A slow, knowing smile crept onto Adam's face. "Fair enough," he murmured, leaning back against the couch. "But you know we'll have to talk about it eventually. Things like that don't just disappear." My heart started pounding. What night? What was he talking about? I glanced at Ethan, searching for answers, but he avoided my gaze. Instead, he forced a small, tight-lipped smile and steered the conversation elsewhere. But the tension in the air didn't fade. Something was lurking beneath their words, an unspoken history neither of them was willing to explain. And I suddenly realized I wasn't just a bystander in this. Whatever had happened in their past, it had just walked through my front door. Dinner was awkward. Despite my best efforts to keep things light, an invisible tension hung over the table like a thick fog. I watched as Adam and Ethan exchanged glances, their words carefully chosen, their smiles forced. Adam, however, seemed to enjoy the discomfort. He played the role of an old friend seamlessly, laughing at stories and making casual conversation. But I noticed the way his eyes lingered too long. On Ethan, on me, on the house. It wasn't just a visit. He was watching, studying, calculating. "So, Ethan," Adam said suddenly, twirling his fork between his fingers, "do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Ethan froze mid-bite. His fingers tightened around his knife, his jaw clenching for just a moment before he forced a laugh. "I don't really live in the past, Adam." Adam hummed, smirking. "Maybe you should." I shifted uncomfortably. The more Adam spoke, the more I felt like an outsider to a story I should have known. "What exactly happened between you two?" I finally asked, unable to hold the question any longer. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Nothing, Julia. Just old times." Adam chuckled. "Oh, it was more than that, wasn't it, Ethan?" His voice was laced with something sinister. Teasing, but not playful. Ethan's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back, standing abruptly. "I think it's getting late," he said, his voice tight. Adam raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. Instead, he placed his napkin down neatly and stood as well. "You're right. It's been a long day." He turned to me, flashing a charming smile. "Dinner was fantastic, Julia. You're a great host." I forced a polite smile. "Thank you." But my mind was spinning. As Ethan walked Adam to the door, I lingered in the dining room, pretending to clear the plates but really just listening. "Whatever you think you're doing, stop," Ethan muttered, his voice low. Adam chuckled under his breath. "Relax, old friend. I'm just here to reminisce." "Don't come back," Ethan warned. There was a beat of silence. Then Adam's voice, calm, almost amused. "Oh, Ethan," he said, "you know that's not up to you." The door closed with a soft click. I turned slowly, watching as Ethan stood there, his fists clenched at his sides. He was pale, rigid. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just angry that Adam had come back. He was afraid. The house felt different after Adam left. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like his presence had soaked into the walls, leaving behind an unease that refused to fade. Ethan barely spoke for the rest of the evening. He busied himself in the garage, pretending to tinker with something, while I sat on the couch, my mind racing. What had Adam meant? Do you ever think about that night? And more importantly, why had Ethan looked so terrified? By the time we climbed into bed, the silence between us had stretched unbearably thin. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to say something. He never did. I turned onto my side, watching him. His breathing was steady, but I could tell. He wasn't asleep either. "Ethan," I whispered. "Nothing." "Talk to me," I pressed. He exhaled through his nose, rubbing his face with one hand. "About what?" "You know what?" I said. "About Adam. About the night he keeps mentioning." Ethan didn't move for a long moment. Then finally he turned his head slightly toward me. Even in the dark, I could see the worry in his eyes. "It's nothing, Julia." I sat up, frustration bubbling inside me. "It's not nothing. You've barely said a word since he left. You looked like you saw a ghost. And don't think I didn't hear what he said at the door." Ethan tensed. "You were listening?" "How could I not?" I demanded. "He said it's not up to you if he comes back. What does that mean?" Ethan pushed himself upright, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Adam and I had a past. It wasn't always great, but it's not something I want to bring into our lives now." "Why?" I challenged. "Because it's dangerous?" Ethan hesitated, just for a second. But it was long enough. A cold shiver ran through me. "Oh my God," I whispered. "It is dangerous." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "I can handle it," he said, his voice firm. My heart pounded. "Ethan, does Adam have something on you?" His silence was my answer. I swallowed hard. "Ethan, what did you do?" He shook his head, looking down. "You don't want to know." A knot formed in my stomach. I thought I knew the man lying beside me. I thought I understood him. But tonight, I realized something that terrified me more than Adam's cryptic words. I didn't know Ethan at all. The next morning, Ethan was already up by the time I got out of bed. I found him in the kitchen, sipping coffee, his eyes distant. He barely acknowledged me as I poured myself a cup, his silence weighing heavier than the words he refused to say. I wasn't going to let it slide. "You didn't sleep," I said, watching him. "Neither did you," he countered, still not meeting my gaze. I set my cup down with more force than necessary. "Ethan, I need answers." Adam shows up out of nowhere, starts dropping cryptic comments, and suddenly, you're acting like the world is about to end. What happened that night? His grip on his coffee mug tightened. "Drop it, Julia." I opened my mouth to argue, but the shrill ring of the doorbell cut me off. We both froze. Slowly, Ethan set his coffee down and walked to the front door. I followed a few steps behind, my stomach twisting with unease. He pulled the door open, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. There was no one there, just a small white envelope lying on the doormat. Ethan bent down, hesitating before picking it up. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned it over. No name, no return address. Just a single word scrawled across the front in sharp, deliberate letters. "Tonight." A chill crawled up my spine. What the hell? Ethan ripped the envelope open. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a printed message. "The past doesn't stay buried forever. Be ready." Ethan's jaw clenched. His entire body tensed as he read the note over and over, his breathing shallow. My blood ran cold. "Ethan, tell me this isn't what I think it is." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned on his heel and stormed back inside, crumpling the note in his fist. I hurried after him. "Ethan, who sent this?" "I don't know." His voice was low, tight, controlled, but barely. "But you think you do." Silence. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to face me. "Ethan, this isn't just about you anymore. Whoever this is, they're involving us. You have to tell me what's going on." He inhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. When he finally looked at me, his expression was haunted. "This isn't over, Julia," he murmured. "It never was." And in that moment, I knew. Adam hadn't come back just to stir up the past. Someone else had been waiting all along. The note changed everything. Ethan stopped pretending. He spent the rest of the day on edge, pacing the house, checking the windows, locking and relocking the doors. It was like he was expecting something, or someone, to come knocking again. I tried pressing him for answers, but he shut down every time. "I just need to handle this," he kept saying. "Let me handle it." But how could I let him handle something I didn't even understand? By nightfall, the tension had seeped into my bones. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside sent shivers through me. Something was coming. I felt it. At 10 p.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. He grabbed it instantly, his face tightening as he read the screen. "Who is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and started toward the door, grabbing his jacket. "Oh no," I said, following him. "You are not leaving right now." "Julia, stay here." "Like hell I will. Tell me what's going on." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Adam wants to meet." I folded my arms. "Of course he does. And let me guess. It has to be tonight?" "He says it's important." I scoffed. "Right. Because everything so far has been totally normal." Ethan exhaled sharply. I know how it sounds, but this isn't a choice. If I don't go… He didn't finish his sentence, and that terrified me more than anything. I grabbed my coat. Then I'm coming with you. No. I narrowed my eyes. Ethan, I am not staying here while you run off into the night to meet some guy who just crawled out of our past with threats. He hesitated, staring at me. I could see the war in his eyes. Finally, he sighed. Fine, but you stay in the car, no matter what. I nodded, but I had no intention of following that rule. The meeting place was an old gas station on the outskirts of town. The neon lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows against the cracked pavement. Adam was already there, leaning against his car, arms crossed. When he saw us, he smirked. I figured you'd bring her. Cut the crap, Adam, Ethan snapped. Tell me what's going on. Adam pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. He held it up between two fingers. This, he said, was left on my windshield. Ethan snatched it and unfolded it. I moved closer, reading over his shoulder. It was the same message we received. The past doesn't stay buried forever. Be ready. My heart pounded. Who's doing this? Adam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Cut the act, Ethan growled. You came back for a reason. You know more than you're letting on. Adam chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I know plenty, but I didn't send that note. He nodded toward the paper in Ethan's hand. And neither did you, which means someone else knows the truth. Ethan's grip on the note tightened. I swallowed hard. The truth. The truth about what? And then… a noise. A rustle from the darkness near the station. All three of us turned at the same time. A shadow moved near the abandoned pumps. Slow. Deliberate. Watching. Adam stiffened. Ethan reached for something in his jacket. And me? I suddenly realized we weren't alone. For a split second, none of us moved. The figure lingered in the shadows near the gas pumps, standing unnervingly still. The flickering neon lights barely illuminated his form, but I could make out the outline of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, watching us. Then he took a step forward. Ethan reacted instantly. His arms shot out, pushing me behind him. Adam, meanwhile, shifted his stance, his hand resting casually near his waist. But there was nothing casual about the way his fingers twitched, like he was ready for a fight. The man stopped just beyond the reach of the gas station lights. He was still partially hidden in the darkness, but now I could make out more. Dark jeans, a hood pulled low over his face, and something in his hand. A folded envelope, just like the ones we had received. Ethan's voice was low, steady. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly, like he was amused by the question. Then, without a word, he extended the envelope toward us. Nobody moved. Then Adam scoffed. Oh, come on. If you wanted to hurt us, you'd have done it by now. He strode forward and snatched the envelope from the man's hand. For the first time, the man spoke. His voice was quiet, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. I just wanted to see your faces. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Ethan took a step forward, fists clenched. What the hell does that mean? The man didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step back, then another. And then, he turned and walked into the darkness beyond the station. Ethan moved to follow, but Adam grabbed his arm. Don't. He's getting away, Ethan snapped. He wants you to follow him, Adam muttered. And you know where that leads. Ethan hesitated, and in that moment, the man disappeared into the night. Silence settled over us. My pulse was still pounding in my ears as Adam unfolded the envelope. His face darkened as he read the message inside. He turned the paper toward us. It was typed, just like the others. But this one was different. You've already buried one secret. How many more are you willing to bury? My stomach twisted into knots. Ethan stared at the note, his expression unreadable. Adam exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "This is bad," he muttered. I swallowed hard. "What does it mean?" Adam's eyes flickered toward Ethan. "It means someone knows exactly what we did." Ethan said nothing, but his silence told me everything. The drive home was silent. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Adam sat in the passenger seat, flipping the note over and over in his hands, lost in thought. I sat in the back, my mind racing. Somebody knew. Somebody had been watching. And whoever they weren't going to stop. When we pulled into the driveway, Ethan killed the engine but didn't move. The tension in the car was suffocating. I was the first to speak. "No more games," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "No more cryptic notes. No more secrets. Tell me the truth." Ethan exhaled slowly, but he didn't look at me. Adam turned in his seat, raising an eyebrow. "You sure you want to know, Julia?" I clenched my jaw. I wouldn't be asking if I didn't. Adam let out a humorless chuckle. "All right then." And then finally, the truth came out. It happened 10 years ago, the summer before Ethan and Adam stopped speaking. They had been reckless back then, young and full of bad decisions. One night, during a trip with friends at a lake house, they had too much to drink. One guy in their group, Marcus, got in a fight with Ethan. Things got heated, punches were thrown, and then, somehow, Marcus fell. He hit his head on the edge of the dock. He rolled into the water, and he never came back up. Panic set in. There were no witnesses, just Ethan, Adam, and one other person, Ryan, Marcus's younger brother. They knew what it looked like. No one would believe it was an accident. So they did the only thing they could think of. They buried the truth. They made sure Marcus's body was never found. Ryan, devastated and furious, vanished after that night. They assumed he had moved away, tried to forget. But now, it was clear. Ryan never forgot. He had been waiting, watching, and now he was back. The air inside the car was thick with silence. I stared at Ethan, my heart hammering. You covered it up?" His hands trembled. "It was an accident, Julia." "That doesn't change the fact that you—" I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. "Oh my God." Adam ran a hand through his hair. "Now you see why he's back." My pulse raced. "Ryan's not just leaving notes, he's warning you." Adam shook his head. "No, Julia. He's playing with us, testing us. And if we don't figure out what he wants—" I didn't need him to finish. We all knew what was coming next. Ethan turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Julia, I never wanted you to be part of this." "But I am part of this," I shot back. "Ryan came to our house, Ethan. This isn't just about you anymore." Adam leaned back in his seat. "The real question is, how far is Ryan willing to go?" Nobody answered. Because we all already knew. Ryan didn't just want revenge. He wanted justice. And justice meant burying the people who buried his brother. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every shadow in the room felt like it was watching. I turned toward Ethan. His eyes were open, staring at the darkness. "Do you think he's going to stop?" I whispered. Ethan didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. Ryan wasn't going to stop. And this wasn't over. Not even close.